opportunity to hear from national governments, from donors, from civil society, and the private sector, each bringing valuable experience and insights on how to shift from short-term responses to long-term transformation. Let me turn it over to the Executive Director of the World Food Program, Cindy McCain, to welcome you.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. Deputy Prime Ministers, Deputy Secretary General, Excellencies, good morning and a warm welcome to this high-level panel. The theme of our conversation today is transformation in complex settings. I know from my own missions to visit WFP frontline operations that our theme isn't just rhetorical, it's increasingly reality as well. Around the world, transformation is already happening in countries that are vulnerable to complex hunger crises, often fueled by conflict, natural disasters, and economic instability. But it's still very early days. We all need to keep learning from each other and spurring each other on. So today, we're going to showcase some of these inspiring stories and shine a spotlight on how countries facing reoccurring and protracted crises are responding with innovative, nationally-led strategies. We'll explore how governments are building new cross-sectoral partnerships, which combine emergency assistance with programs that help to reduce humanitarian needs, strengthen food systems, and build longer-term resilience and stability. We'll examine how national strategies against hunger can unlock the investments needed to fire up the engines of transformation. We all recognize that it's especially challenging to address the causes of food insecurity and build more resilient food systems in complex settings. Yet it's vital that we do. The 2025 Global Report on Food Crises concluded that 295 million people face acute food insecurity. I also highlighted that at least 80% live in places gripped by reoccurring or protracted crises. We know that where food systems collapse, instability rises. So breaking the complex cycle of hunger, fragility, and crises that traps so many families is the key to creating a more stable and food-secure future for all. This session is an important opportunity to share practical, scalable solutions that can drive real change on the ground. So I hope we all leave here even more determined to turn ambition into action and ready to step up our collaboration as we work to achieve a world free from hunger. Thank you for your partnership and your support, and now I look forward to hearing from the speakers. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Cindy McCain. So we are going to be having a very interactive time today. We'll have some Davos-style panels. We'll also gather some colleagues at the table to share their thoughts and their insights from their countries and from their experience. But first, we will start with a keynote address, and we are really delighted to have our Deputy Secretary General, Ms. Amina Mohammed, to address you. We're so grateful, Deputy Secretary General, for your vision, your advocacy, your unwavering commitment, and your leadership, and look forward to hearing your words today. Thank you.
Thank you. His Excellency Kashim Shettima, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, our Deputy Prime Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, and some friends that I see in the audience. I'm truly honored to be here with you today on this particular subject. It has been one that has challenged us in trying to address the SDGs. There are many, many complex settings, and having them not recognized has been a challenge to achieving the SDGs. So I thank our co-hosts, Ethiopia and Italy, WFP, UNICEF, and the HDB Nexus Coalition for organizing this important conversation. I'd like to thank you for all your presence today, your commitment to putting an end to hunger and transforming our food systems, making these work even in the most dire and complex situations. Dear friends, communities are trapped around the world in relentless cycles of hardship. Over 37 million children under 5 will face acute malnutrition this year, almost the entire population of Canada. Of those, nearly 10 million will suffer severe wasting, the deadliest form of undernutrition. In many countries facing the greatest challenges, courage is on display at this moment. But we must ensure that courage is matched with long-term solutions that can result in resilience and sustainability. Short-term interventions dominate, with little connection to the long-term development planning, and they're not the solutions that we are seeking. So we must choose transformation over dependency. We have good examples. Nations are embedding resilience into national strategies. Leaders are refusing to accept hunger as inevitable. Instead, they're combining local, indigenous, and traditional knowledge with science to accelerate action towards inclusive and resilient food systems while rebuilding their nations. These governments are not waiting for permission, they're leading. But leadership cannot succeed alone. It must be built on a solid foundation that is rooted in adequate finance, genuine partnerships, and inclusion. On finance, we need finance that multiplies impact, catalytic investments that invest in local capacity, patient capital that waits for transformation, not quick returns. The World Bank has committed to this approach, and we must encourage others to follow. Second, we need coordination that serves people and not bureaucracies. Bureaucracies are important. We need strong public sector and public institutions, but we do need to coordinate for impact and impact in people's lives. Humanitarian responses linked to long-term development, climate action connected to food security, and competing mandates replaced by shared purpose. And third, we need to place communities at the center of our efforts. Women grow 60% of Africa's food, but own less than 20% of the land. Young people are at the vanguard of innovative agriculture, but cannot access the financing that supports them. And this is especially the case in complex settings where perceived risk is much higher and the options are fewer. Yet investing in the transformation of food systems is especially critical in complex settings where equitable and sustainable food systems do more than just feed people. They drive food security, they strengthen resilience, enable stability, and promote inclusive economic growth. So this transformation must be guided by local innovations and proven strategies rooted in robust data and the lived realities of crisis-affected communities. We have the tools and we have inspiring examples from countries leading change, many of which we are going to hear about in this room today. What we do need now is accelerated action at scale, meeting the expectations of those who suffer on a daily basis. Food systems hold the key to sustainable development, and let's use that key to unlock opportunity, stability, and hope for and a life of dignity for those who need it most. And let's not forget that we need to strengthen our multilateral system so that peace and sustainable development remain a reality for all communities around the world. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary General, for your inspiring words and for really reminding us that food systems need to work for people and that we need to ensure that food systems are working for everyone everywhere, including in contexts that may be facing some challenges. This sets the scene very, very clearly and very good for the dialogue that we are going to have now. And we'll be having this dialogue in Davos style on the floor in these seats right before us. I would like to bring in now the perspectives of countries who have really been taking inspiring actions in transforming their food systems. I'm inviting 3 distinguished speakers to the panel. We're very privileged to have with us here today His Excellency Kashim Shettima, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Please, Vice President. We are also delighted to have with us today His Excellency Salah Ahmed Jammeh, the Deputy Prime Minister of the Federal Government of Somalia. Excellency. And let me also invite, we're delighted to have with us Mr. Mubarak Abakar Rudo, the Secretary General of the Ministry of Agricultural Production and Industrialization from the Republic of Chad. And let me come and join you. Well, welcome. Each of you have inspiring insights that you can share about how governments can really drive transformation, and you've been doing that in your countries. I have one question that I want to be asking each of you, and I will start with the Vice President, Your Excellency. Perhaps if you could tell us what policies and actions have had the greatest impact when it comes to ensuring that your food systems are resilient to shocks and stressors. What have you learned, and how are you taking your successes to scale? Over to you, Vice President.
Thank you so much. Food dependency, one philosopher said, conditions other kinds of dependency. And so long as a nation is not independent in the area of food sovereignty, it remains a non-sovereign nation. When we assume the mantle of leadership, we met the nation in a very sorry state of affairs. And His Excellency President Tinubu immediately declared a state of food emergency. Not born out of fear, but born out of genuine concern for the welfare of our people, especially in conflict-ridden environments like the Northeast, where Boko Haram was sowing seeds of discord and destruction. We had 25 million vulnerable people in an already fragile environment. So the government came out with some very broad policy guidelines informed by the need to strengthen our food systems. This includes the setting up of the Presidential Food Systems Coordinating Unit, meant not to displace the existing bodies, but to coordinate their activities for enhanced food delivery. And issues like the food support mechanism in the Northeast and the Northeast, we applaud the World Food Program and all the multilateral agencies that came to the support of our people. But most importantly, there is a saying in Africa that when you feed a man for a day, when you give a fish to a man, you have paid him for a day. If you teach him how to fish, you have paid him for life. So in our displaced people's camps, the government took the initiative to rather empower the displaced people to produce their own foodstuff. That will give us resilience, that will give them dignity, and most importantly, that will give us buffer against shocks. In the Sahelian region, there is an incestuous relationship between economy and ecology, and the government has to come up with very, very robust policies and frameworks to ensure that our people do not fall into despair. Hunger knows no bounds. Hunger does not discriminate. So this is why we are determined to put in place structures, enhance our strategic grain reserves, and most importantly, to empower smallholder farmers and women and youth by giving them incentives. Our belief is that our agriculture should be market-driven, not about handouts. And the whole mantra is on increase in yield, because entrepreneurial capitalism is embedded in the very psyche of the average Nigerian. But what they are lacking is the wherewithal to place them on Jeffrey Sachs' pace ladder of development. And the whole mantra is on increase in yield. To me, as the Vice President of Nigeria, people talk about GM foods. Our effort is to feed the people. I don't care if GM foods can provide food for the people. The whole mantra is on increase in yield, embrace modern agricultural practices, fertilization, improve seeds, better agricultural practices. This is why we are reinforcing our extension services so that our farmers can get up-to-date data on rainfall patterns, on how to manage the climate shocks that is ravaging our parts of the world. I don't want to dominate the conversation. Let me allow my other colleagues on the panel to also make their own contribution and perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice President, for highlighting how you've turned moments of crisis into an opportunity to ensure also that no one is left behind, and the way that you're bringing along the population as part of the transformation, ensuring the food systems work for people, but also looking specifically at women, at youth, at inclusion, is something that we can all be inspired from, by, and learn from. I'd like to now turn to Somalia and really ask you the same question. What policies, what actions have you in Somalia put in place that you see having the greatest impact when it comes to ensuring that your food systems are resilient? And what have you learned from that, and how are you taking this to scale?
Well, thank you very much, and I would like to thank both the panelists and the participants and the heads of international organizations and heads of states for convening this very important forum so that we can understand and, to quote Amina, appreciate the role and the complexities in countries like Somalia and the need to bring that complexity to the global platform so that we can find durable solutions collectively, both as the Somali government and our international partners. So let me begin by giving you a bit of a context. For the last prior 25 years or 30 years, the world was familiar with Somalia in crisis, conflict, migration, and the absence of government. And that has led to a situation in which recurring droughts, food shortage, importing 70% of our food has become the norm. So after the Somali state has been revived and the state building process has gained momentum, we have come to realize that we cannot address this issue of food insecurity in a silos manner. So we have come to develop a set of integrated policies, national policies. For instance, let me begin by, I don't want to dwell on how for the last 10 years we have gone through the debt relief process, and it took us a good decade to go through the debt forgiveness program for $5.5 billion, which we hope would give us an opportunity to now get into concessional loans or maybe grants and other systems. So for now, we have developed a national transformation plan that has replaced our national development plan. And at the center of our national transformation plan, which is going to be for 5 years, is the idea of improving the issues of fragility, complexities arising from food shortage and food systems, and focusing on our productive sector and water management. These are the foundational policy areas. And of course, we also have the sector-specific policies, we have come to realize that we have had well over 20 droughts, 18 droughts, floods in the last 30 years. So these recurring phenomena need permanent, durable, sustainable solutions, not one-time fixes. We appreciate the good effort of the humanitarian sector and other interventions, but what we are hoping for is that state-led solutions in collaboration with local partners would be able to bring about transformation. We have focused on water management as a top policy issue. We also have come to understand that different systemic interventions in the agricultural sector, and we are mostly a livestock herding and semi-agrarian society. From community-led to small scale, we don't have the luxury of dealing with large scale infrastructural projects for now, but we appreciate the work we are doing with FAO, over 130 million, is also different agencies involved. The World Bank, social protection programs. I used to be the Minister of Labor and Social Affairs, and now we have a huge portfolio that covers a significant as members of our society so that they can deal with shocks. We have the plans, but finally, I know I have exceeded my time. Without the enough resources and dedicated resources, it is very difficult to attain these plans. So the issue of financing is of top priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister, and really for highlighting how Somalia has worked both to change the narrative and to change the reality on the ground. The shocks, the stressors, they continue, but the systems need to be in place in order to help better cope with them, and the partnerships that are coming together to support you in doing that are important as well. Let us now move over to Chad, so we move westwards. And here, Mr. Rubo, we wanted to hear a little bit more on how you are taking policies and action decisions, where they have had the greatest impact, and how you are taking your successes to scale. Over to you.
Bien, merci. Je pense que
Thank you. I think I'll speak in French, because I'm more French-speaking than English-speaking. So it's an honor to be able to speak here. Sound is not sufficient for interpretation. Thank you.
de la Somalie, donc je représente le ministre de l'Agriculture.
I represent the Ministry of Agriculture, who was not able to attend due to last minute. There is echo in the room.
Connaissent la plupart des pays du Sahel. Donc, pour un pays
I think our situation is similar to that of many countries in Sahel. We have 18 million inhabitants in Chad, 18 or 19 million, and more than 1 million square kilometers. Echo in the room, interpretation is not possible.
là. Et 20% de la population tchadienne est en insécurité alimentaire, donc à peu près, disons, entre 3 et 4 millions d'habitants, donc qui est en insécurité alimentaire. Et donc les causes de cette insécurité alimentaire sont connues, c'est les changements climatiques, la rareté des pluies, la crise acridienne qui peut arriver par moment. Et donc on a par moment des crises qui sont plus aiguës que d'autres. Et certaines années, nous avons pratiquement des problèmes qui sont liés même aux inondations
So several years we had issues linked to flooding. And so with regards to the measures that we have taken in order to strengthen food security in Chad, for a very long time, the issue was to find purely agricultural responses for a very long time. The fight towards food security, we had to just increase food production. But this response was not satisfactory because we realized that in fact we needed a more integrated solution. So in rural areas, we tended to see that simply increasing production could not resolve the issue of food security. So we had to have a more holistic approach. For example, creating other forms of revenue generation by teaching certain producers also to have livestock, for example. So then during periods of drought, also have off-season agriculture that enabled the populations to still have food security during the dry season. So these measures were taken thanks also to external financing, whether from FAO, WFP, from World Bank, FIDA, etc. So this comprehensive solution meant that we had to combine agriculture and livestock rearing and also develop off-season agriculture. So for those, we needed irrigation. We also needed a mastery of water, management of water in agricultural areas to enable agriculture during periods when we didn't have rains, to irrigate the lands and to enable to have agriculture, enable them to grow and sell in the markets. So all these policies were taken, and we now have a more comprehensive approach. So not just an agricultural approach. So food security is not just agricultural, it also includes livestock rearing, microfinancing, revenue generating activities, and all the rest. Currently that situation has been implemented. I think that gives more or less satisfactory solutions. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you.
Monsieur Roubaud, pour votre intervention,
Thank you, Mr. Rubo, for your statements.
highlighting how it's not enough to focus just on increasing production. You really needed to take a food systems approach in order to ensure that the resilience was also built in to the system for the communities. And while I'm sure that resonates across the Sahel, I think it also resonates beyond the Sahel with countries facing either too much or too little rain during certain seasons and certain years. Thank you so much to our three distinguished panelists for sharing your experiences and your insights and for inspiring all of us. I invite you to take your seats. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I would like to now move on to our next roundtable, which is on accountability. And I would like to invite to the chairs here Her Excellency Ruth Davis, the Special Representative for Nature from the United Kingdom. Thank you. His Excellency Brendan Gleeson, the Secretary General from the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine from Ireland. Thank you so much. And His Excellency Javier Nino Perez. Oh, we're not having, so we're just having the two today. Unfortunately, the ambassador from the EU was unable to join the panel, but we're looking forward to our discussion here today with the two of you. And here too, I have one bold and inspiring question that I want to ask the two of you. How are partner countries engaging? In what ways are you changing or updating your approaches and your investments in order to drive impact and transformation, particularly in more complex settings? So I would love to hear perhaps first from you, Ruth.
Working. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to the previous panelists for the really extraordinary insights that they've offered to us. I'd like to take a moment, if I can, to recognize the ongoing food crises and the human suffering, including the widespread hunger in Gaza and in Sudan, and recognize the extreme pressure that's currently on the humanitarian system. It seems very important for us to say that before we then move on to a conversation about how we can invest more in the resilience side of the conversation. We know that we need to move to a humanitarian system and a response that is cost effective and is locally led. And this is a top priority for us in the United Kingdom. We really want to make sure that we're deploying our political and our resourcing levers to do that. And I speak as the envoy to the Foreign Secretary when I make that remark. However, like everybody here has said today, we strongly recognize that we also need to find longer-term solutions to the problems, and that we do need more systemic action to build resilience so that we can break out of the cycle that we've heard repeatedly and that I've heard in my bilateral conversations with people over the course of the last few days, that traps people in a situation where the combination of the nexus of conflict and climate change, economic instability, creates a reliance on emergency aid, which every partner we have would like to see change. So I think I then want to think a little bit about how to answer your question about how we're doing and hoping to respond to that particularly in the UK context. We're very committed, I think, to the idea of having a part of our response in complex situations to be really focused on resilience. And for us, we see food systems as the sort of critical underpinning of that, simply because it is central to the lives of so many people in the complex context that we're talking about. That's why at the last G20, we launched the UK Resilience and Adaptation Fund. And some of the elements of that we see as being particularly important are focusing on early warning and prearranged finance, on social protection measures, but also very particularly on sustainable agriculture. And I think in the context of that, also looking at how we can make sure that we're working with partners to invest in the quality of soils, in water systems that work, and particularly important to me and in some of the conversations I've had over the course of the last few days, thinking about land restoration in a conflict-sensitive way, in a way that's going to enable the recovery of those long-term resources that actually enable people to be able to sustain their livelihoods. So we really want to play a part in that. We can also hear very clearly, and I'm extremely conscious of the fact that we have a system in our international financial institutions, in our climate finance, that is not reaching the most vulnerable people in the places where that needs to happen. We really need to take that on as a collective challenge. I spend quite a lot of the context of the climate change negotiations and other multilateral systems. And whilst I think we pay some service to that, I'm not sure that we've done really nearly enough to challenge ourselves in the roles that we play in those institutions to try to improve access and to try to move people into a space where that money is doing what it was intended to do, which is to reach people in the most vulnerable contexts. That includes looking at the IFIs and the climate funds, but also people have raised rightly the issue of wanting to build agricultural systems and food systems that are private sector driven, that are market driven, that are part of a thriving economy. And the challenge we then have is to try to work in a way that means that the sort of appropriate private sector finance can work in a way that is really providing the credit that works, that is necessary and is long-term and sustainable for smallholder farmers and for SMEs. Again, I don't think that's a challenge that we've solved, but it's one that we collectively would like to take on. And then my final point, I think, is that we can all see that we're working in an enormously complex system. It's a very, very institutionally complex system, multiple initiatives, multiple overlapping systems. What can we do to make that work better so that we're really giving the political signal we need to through things like the G20 and through things like climate COPs, but also recognizing that political leadership is coming through things like the high-level panel on social protection, and then work through our systems to make sure that every piece of them are driving the finance we need down to the level that it needs to get to. So that's our, both our offer and also our request for partnership for others to solve those problems. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing these insights, and I think some of the ways in which the United Kingdom is looking to adapt in the face of these growing challenges. You highlight the crises are not going away. The food crisis itself is becoming a systemic issue, not a seasonal or an annual issue, and some of the ways in which you're adapting, but also some insights for how the broader investment community, partner community, needs to adapt in order to really better face the moment. So thank you for sharing that. And now I would like to turn to Brendan Gleeson. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm not sure I can follow that really, so well done, Ruth. So look, I speak as a member of the Global Network Against Food Crisis. My advisor warned me to say that. And I think we're the first Ministry for Agriculture to be a member, and we're very proud of that. So look, the session is about accountability. And I must say I'm not keen on that word accountability. There's something slightly accusatory about it. And people will say, well, you're a civil servant. Of course you think that. I do think it's about public confidence in the work we do. We all want to make sure that the work we do is impactful. And I think what that requires is transparency, and it requires an established and accepted framework of evaluation and monitoring. And if we can't evaluate the work we do, its effectiveness, I think, we'll fail in that objective of building public confidence in the work we do. And I think it's worth saying too that, in my view, collective support for the multilateral framework is more important than it ever has been. And in Ireland, we've increased our contribution to the World Food Programme by 40% recently. And I think there was a crisis in confidence some time ago. And I think, so this is where that word accountability comes in. But without that multilateral framework, it's our best hope for dealing with these really, really difficult and intractable problems. In terms of long-term engagement, you need political commitment. You need a systemic approach to dealing with the long-term problems. And in Ireland, quite a different environment to many of the countries, many of the representatives here, but we have built a long-term systems approach to developing our agri-food sector with 10-year plans. And we have engaged the people whose lives and businesses are affected by those plans in the process of policy development. So I think it's critically important that we don't bypass the people who are affected by the things we do, and that we build them in, not just to policy development, but also to its implementation over the long term.
Thank you. Thank you. I like the concept of building confidence, and that confidence needs to be residing both among the donor constituencies and first and foremost in the countries where teamwork up here, and first and foremost in the countries that are being invested in, and ensuring that the voice of the people, the knowledge of the people informs the policies is a key way in which we are needing to adapt, and I think it really embodies the concept of localization that we are increasingly focused on: local solution, local action, local ownership, but really making sure that people are at the decision-making table on systems that fundamentally impact their life. Food systems are made from people to serve people, and that needs to be front and center in any efforts to be building resilient food systems. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today, and I invite you to take your seats. While I move up top for the next exciting dynamic panel. This is so that I can get my steps in. You know, sometimes we end up sitting too much at these conferences. And so I am going to call. I'll use this for a while. I'll call to the stage our next dynamic, exciting panel discussion. I have Mali here, His Excellency Daniel Simon Kalema. Please come. From Yemen. From Yemen, we have Mustafa Ahmed Mohamed Noman. Please join us. From the World Bank, I have Ms. Shobha Shetty. From Germany, BMZ, I have Mr. Philip Nil. From HSA, the private sector, from Yemen, Mr. Mohammed Hayel Sayed. From 249 Startup Sudan, which is a private sector, I have Mr. Mutaz Mohammed. And from Orda in Ethiopia, right here near home, I have Mr. Dejen Minluku Mikoya.
And please, if I have mispronounced any of your names, please correct us as you begin to speak.
Okay, let me shift over to this. And I would like to start with Mali. Where's Mali? There's Mali. I understand that Mali has a flagship food systems initiative that aims to tackle structural challenges and drive progress on the sustainable development goals. And this is really not just Mali, but also across the Central Sahel. Can you tell us a little bit about what this is and how have you worked with local and international partners to develop and implement this flagship initiatives? Over to you, Mr. Kalema.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome all who are here, distinguished guests, participants. Now, the flagship program for the food systems transformation are co-creations. They were created in cooperation between the governments of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, with, of course, the help of the United Nations. And this reflects the priorities as well as the yearnings of the countries of the Alliance of the Sahel States, the ASS. Now, these initiatives have been placed under our national leaders, and they're fully aligned with the visions of our respective states. When it comes to Mali, it's the 2063 vision, as well as a national strategy for the emergence and development and sustainable development of our country. Now, as part of this process, the United Nations institutions play a facilitating role. They serve as technical advisors, whereas the governments, as sovereign governments, drive the vision. They designed it, they're implementing these transformative programs. This co-creation model illustrates a new type of partnership, one that strengthens national ownership. It consolidates sovereignty and guarantees that solutions are one which are part and parcel of our national development agendas. Now, the budgetary support provided to this flagship program for our three countries is of close to $4 billion, money which is necessary for 35 high-impact set of actions aimed at improving food security in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. This investment, this need for investment, is allocated as follows: 65% for transformative infrastructure, about just 35%, and 45% for priority food chains such as rice, njebe, aquaculture, and livestock. Now, the tangible results of these flagship programs are a saving of $900 million a year in terms of food imports and a reduction of 10 to 30% of malnutrition, which has generated close to $25 million of savings in terms of the provision of health care. There's also been the creation of 450 non-agricultural jobs, 60% allocated to women and youth. And there was a growth of our GNP, which we believe will be of 1 to 3%. And finally, 20 million individuals will stand to benefit from reliable access to food and nutrition. Now, an innovative element of this flagship program is the transboundary synergy. What we're trying to do here is to strengthen commercial and trade corridors between our regional alliance with benefits for all of West Africa and even beyond West Africa. We also have the sustainable co-investment model, a profitable one. This is not charity. And finally, we have smart agricultural approaches when it comes to climate change, renewable energies, and of course, digitalization, which have all turned this flagship program especially attractive for investors. It is both green and impactful. Now, this flagship program, covering our 3 countries, represents a strategic investment for peace, for development, because it tackles the deep-rooted causes of instability, poverty, food insecurity, and unemployment. We urge all of our partners for development, the international financial institutions, as well as the private sector, to come and join us in this co-financing effort. This is not a case of charity, no. This is an opportunity to participate in a mutually beneficial partnership. Thank you.
Merci, and thank you for sharing these examples on behalf of the Central Sahel Initiative. I'd now like to turn to Mr. Mustafa Noman from Yemen. In Yemen, what strategies can government adopt to mobilize partnerships that go beyond emergency aid and that really help lay the groundwork for sustained investment in resilient food systems?
Okay, thank you. At the outset, I must say that our presence here is a signal that the crisis-affected countries are not passive to the crises that the whole world is passing through. And we in Yemen, we admit that the causes of the disrupted food system and nutrition are mainly caused by, first, the sectoral difficulties, the overlapping and complex challenges caused by deeply rooted structural and social issues. And during the past decades, because of the abundant funds, these difficulties were not seen, they were not visible, they were not hidden behind the flow of much of the finances coming from the donors. Now we have also the overwhelming focus on the humanitarian system has damaged the public and institutional capacities because of everybody was focusing on the humanitarian assistance, and that kept the structural of the institutions hidden from our eyes. Now my country has come to some plans. First of all, we have to put an emphasis and funding going direct to enable public institutions and strengthening them. Secondly, investing in food systems transformation and nutrition is not only humanitarian necessity in Yemen, but it's also a strategic decision to stabilize the country that has been devastated by a civil war during the last decade. Now we have some practical actions that we believe can help us. We are first in close collaboration with the Yemen Partner Group, the YPG, and the national UN agencies and technical stakeholders. We are adapting humanitarian development peace HDP nexus, and Yemen has localized it, and we have issued national guidelines that promote coordinated actions and strengthen capacity. And finally, we have also issued the National Food System Transformation Path. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting these efforts in Yemen. I'd now like to turn to the World Bank, to Shobha Shetty. How can financial institutions like the World Bank use their influence to drive more investment and better policy for agriculture and food systems in complex settings in particular? And how can doing this unlock even greater investment?
Thank you very much, Valerie, for your question, and very happy to be here on this distinguished panel, and really benefiting from the previous panelists as well. So I think without a doubt, today's global food finance architecture needs to look very different to create resilient economy. So let me tell you a little bit about how the World Bank Group is addressing this issue. First, we believe that humanitarian response and development finance really have to be two sides of the same coin. Through our $9 billion AgriConnect initiative, we are now pioneering integrated financing that works across the entire spectrum, from immediate crisis response to also long-term market development and institutional strengthening. In Yemen, for example, this means deploying predictive analytics that achieve 80% accuracy in forecasting food crises while simultaneously investing in agricultural value chains that will outlast the conflict. Our previous speaker from Somalia, the Deputy Prime Minister, talked about how Somalia is turning around. And here we are supporting a regional food systems resilience program, the FSRP, and Somalia is part of that for Eastern Africa, where it addresses both short-term issues, the humanitarian, the crises issues through its menu of options, as well as long-term institutional building along with our partners such as WFP and FAO. So the second aspect I think I'd like to highlight is what we are doing in repurposing existing agricultural support. We are currently working with over 45 governments in partnership with BMZ, FCDO, and others to repurpose harmful agricultural subsidies and support to achieve more resilient and climate-smart outcomes. So of the $650 billion approximately that governments spend annually, the majority distorts markets and deepens inequalities, especially in fragile contexts. And we are working in these 45 countries to try and redirect these flows. So shifting even just 10% of this towards climate-smart agriculture practices could transform food systems across Africa's fragile regions. This will need political will, but will also provide confidence for private sector to come in. And third, I think we must recognize that in fragile contexts, and Her Excellency Ruth Davis mentioned Gaza and Sudan and many, many other places around the world, food systems are the social contract. And when agriculture employs 60 to 80% of the population, as it does across the Sahel and many other regions, food system failure equals state failure. Yet agriculture receives only 4% of climate finance, with less than 1% reaching smallholders, many of whom are the first line of defense against extremism and forced displacement. But I think we have to be optimistic, and these shifts in global financing architecture are doable. And we need to move from a risk avoidance approach to more intelligent risk sharing. And together with our private sector arm, IFC and MEGA, the World Bank now is developing new instruments, partial guarantees, first loss facilities, currency hedging, all specifically designed for fragile contexts, and where de-risking is going to be key, especially for the private sector capital to come in. In West Africa, our $900 million regional approach doesn't just pool resources, it creates cross-border resilience that matches the scale of the challenges. And of course, we have to transition from projects-based to systems financing. And we now have food systems preparedness plans in 26 countries, which establish government-led frameworks that integrate early warning, social protection, and market interventions. So it's really rewiring how governments think about food security as a foundation for stability. So let me leave you with one last point. The return on transforming food systems in fragile contexts isn't just the $4.3 trillion in economic benefits that our models predict. It's also preventing the next generation of conflicts, the next wave of forced displacement, and the next cascade of state failures. So this real transformation requires every actor in this room to really question their assumptions about risk, about timelines, and about what is possible when we align capital with courage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shobha, and I think really highlighting ways in which the World Bank and other financial institutions are really trying to connect that capital, that investment more to fragile contexts. And climate financing is that nut, I think, that we still need to crack in order to do this. But I liked your ending on the return as well. Let's turn to Germany, and we have Philip Nell with us. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about BMZ's experience of development cooperation in Africa, which I know is deep. Tell us about the best ways, what you've learned about the best ways to approach investments in food systems in complex settings in order to deliver that long-term multi-sector impact that we are all seeking. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, and actually also thanks to the speakers from Mali and Yemen to also point out that it's about the structural causes of hunger and inequality that need to be tackled to really be successful in agri-food systems discussions and provide food for people. First of all, we have a new government, and we have renewed actually our commitment to agri-food system support. It's about 2 billion per year, and we intend to remain strong on that one. However, ODA must be catalytic. Even with the 15 billion or 17 billion of the international financing institutions, it will not be enough. We need to tackle the structural causes of the drivers of hunger and poverty, which is conflict, which is climate change, and which is inequality. How can we do it? There are for sure the broad themes of strengthening trade, African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We are working with ECOWAS and AU very closely on integrating food systems considerations also in trade questions. It's about domestic resource mobilization. I think at the Seville conference, there's a new declaration on strengthening actually tax systems, strengthening the fight against illicit financial flows, $90 billion flowing out of Africa every year. And it's about subsidies, turning around harmful and price distorting subsidies in the agricultural sector, 800 billion a year, and 87% of them not fully fit for purpose. So, and we are working on these questions very strongly with partners, World Bank for sure, but African Union and other partners. What can we do in settings, or is our experience, what can we do in settings where it's more complex? Just an example on Sudan, and we will hear more of it from Mutaz Mohamed from 249 startups. Even in Sudan, there's a private sector, and they are continuing. But they cannot continue if there's no access to finance at all. So we try to work with many partners and provide grant and hopefully also credit financing as soon as possible. Again, high-risk operations for sure, to companies that still provide services on food, on trade, and so on. Very important to be in that area. And then let me just highlight a few examples also on climate change. There's the Global Shield Initiative on really pre-arranged financing, on risk insurance. It's a big initiative between the vulnerable countries and between G20 countries. We have to take forward these much more private sector-based and also including the public sector-based, public sector initiatives, really to find solutions to shocks and risks, prepare, prevent, and then be able to disperse pre-arranged funding very quickly. Very important that we continue in that work. For example, the Horn of Africa or also the Sahel region. We are working very closely with WFP on resilience initiatives that really go down to the local level, even though in difficult circumstances. And we want to build a bridge between really humanitarian aid and then the longer term development questions, which are of key importance. Finally, let me just echo what our colleague Brendan Gleeson from Ireland also said. We think that the Global Network Against Food Crisis is a very good initiative, and we would be happy to continue working with you and also look at the concrete work preparedness plans and so on in the future jointly. So happy to join you in these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip, also for highlighting that alongside all of the important work on making the longer-term investments work better in complex settings and in fragile contexts is also connecting the dots with some of the humanitarian and crisis response financing, looking more at prearranged financing, at early warning, at anticipatory action, as well as ensuring that this is baked into risk insurance as well, and that this is baked in to the thinking on the longer term, and then that public-private connection is also key. So let's move to the private sector, and we'll turn to Mr. Mohammed Syed from HSA. And I would love to hear from you, we would love to hear from you on how do you see the role of the private sector in Yemen in terms of food security and resilience? We know Yemen is, a lot of food is imported into the country. The private sector clearly plays an important role. So tell us about that, but also tell us about what you think the government, the NGO sector, the UN can learn from the private sector, and how we can work better with the private sector, as we're all trying to do. Over to you.
It's a very tough question. I'll try to answer that. First of all, thank you so much, and I'm thrilled to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mohammed Hayal Saeed, and I represent HSA Group. It was my grandfather and 3 of his brothers that started from a small retail shop in the port of Aden in 1938. 9 decades later, the group has grown to be one of the largest family businesses based out of the Middle East, operating from Southeast Asia, most of the Middle East, Africa, and the UK. Today, we employ around 35,000 people in our global operations. Most importantly, I think we meet at a time where communities around the world are at the edge, pushed by conflict, poverty, economic instability. Today, in 2025, around 300 million people around the world are facing acute hunger, and around 400 million of these people are living less than $3 a day. I'm not a theorist. We like to say as private sector, we're boots on the ground, but we're a force for good. We live fragility day in and day out in Yemen, but in many other conflict-affected countries, in regions like this. But today, HSA is the largest private sector in Yemen. We're the largest private employer in the country, food manufacturer and distributor. And our North Star has been for so many years that we should be committed to our communities in both prosperous and troubled times alike. And when the conflict in Yemen erupted, we had, as a private sector, 3 choices to make: either shut down, slow down, or adapt and continue business as usual. And a lot of private sector actors in places like Ethiopia, Africa, and Yemen, and all these growing frontier markets know that adaptability is so important. And local private sector were able to adapt and innovate. I'd like to mention 3 key learnings from the private sector perspective. First is that long-term investment beats short-term. We're not in the business of trying to cut corners to generate quick profits. We're in the business of being committed to the people and knowing that the sun will rise one day. Secondly, job creation. Job creation is peace building. And HSA remains committed to all the employees we employ, but also a lot of private sector. In the midst of the challenges the public sector has been facing, it was the private sector that stepped up and continued being a source of employment. And then finally, and a lot of the speakers have been saying about the power of partnership. We know what is the power of partnership. We've partnered with the IFC World Bank in 2021 at a time where the country has been facing challenges, but also the private sector has a bandwidth. We need, there's a saying that says in Arabic, people think it's Chinese. I like to say it's Arabic, that one hand doesn't clap, and so it takes two hands to clap. So the private sector works alongside the Yemeni government, but also with NGOs, civil society organizations. It's so important to work also with the international community. So we're very proud of the partnership with the WFP as well, and Tetra Pak and other multinational organizations. And if there is one thing I would like to leave you guys today is that in the hardest places on earth, handouts doesn't build anything. Jobs build, and dignity does. And what we want to make sure that as international community, as multilateral organization, and the private sector is we're working to build jobs and to create jobs, because that's the only thing that keeps hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mohammed, for your inspiring words, the voice of the private sector, emphasizing jobs. I mean, nobody wants a handout. Nobody wants everybody wants to be able to feed their families. And so at the heart of resilient food systems, it's the ability for people to feed their families, either through their own production or through what they're able to purchase in the market. And we need to keep that front and center. Thank you. And we continue with the private sector, and we move to 249 startups in Sudan. And here it would be really interesting to hear how I think with HSA, we see quite a large global national organization or private sector that has global outreach. Here we're looking more local. And so how are local organizations and entrepreneurs in Sudan driving solutions for agro-food systems and for resilience? And what does this tell us about the importance of youth and private sector engagement? Over to you.
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you for the organizers of this important discussions for having us. I think basically Sudan, every time Sudan comes to mind, I think also was mentioned today a couple of times, and it was always associated with basically hunger and humanitarian crisis, and that's unfortunately real. But thanks also to Philip and Mohammed to kind of also trying to maybe shed a different narrative, and this is also what I would be trying to do here today. So basically, I would start with saying that Sudan is actually home to startups and home to innovation hubs and home also to local incubators. And that young Sudanese entrepreneurs are building fintech solutions, are building renewable energy solutions, are building clean cooking stoves models, and building essential services and that meet the real market needs. And that's all happening during the conflict. And many Sudanese are still investing in innovation despite what's going on ground. We launched 249 Startup in 2018 to kind of with the objective of being the gate that helps Sudanese startups to connect with the global markets and investment opportunities. It started in Khartoum and expanded, guided by market mapping to other states. And our next stop was actually Darfur. Many were surprised. Darfur was viewed largely through humanitarian lens as well. But we saw the second largest market in the country, entrepreneurial energy, youth eager to solve challenges. And not surprisingly, some of the most promising startups came from there. Yet just months after launching in Darfur, war broke out, of the crisis expanded across the country. Overnight, we found ourselves from planning investments and having discussions around local equity structures to asking, does any of this still matter? Entrepreneurs, and the answer came quickly through entrepreneurs who were able to kind of refusing to settle to the situation, who were able to relocate, restart, and began delivering the critical services while others were failing to kind of adapt to the situation. Those who offered fintech solutions that addressed the gap left by the collapsed banks and system. Agritech supporting disrupted farming, renewable energy, and telemedicine reaching cutting of communities. Local manufacturers serving agricultural needs from planting to processing. These were fully local innovation shaped by necessity and context. At the same time, Sudanese diaspora continued to invest in their friends and families, not just for profit, but also out of belief in survival through enterprise. Our local private sector partners also stepped in, and we were also lucky to basically, in one of the programs funded by the Netherlands, where that would require local co-financing, that the local private sector actually had recorded in that year the highest private sector contribution in comparison to other countries the same program is being implemented. And basically, we were able to also to gain new alliances through support from Italian corporations, through which we launched blended finance instrument that enabled us to kind of establish guarantee schemes, revolving credit and market-based tools for smallholder farmers and agribusinesses. These efforts continued through partnership with German-funded initiatives by the GIZ and also ASF, collaboration with ASF in the Sudan SME Catalyzer program, through which we're supporting high potential SMEs to scale to reestablish operating and deliver essential services. This highlights many things. It's basically the immense untapped potential of Sudanese entrepreneurs, the need for more tools, financial, technical, and ecosystem infrastructure to reach those still left out. And there's another insight. In fragile settings, disruption can be a powerful moment to rethink broken systems. Our message is simple. Yes, Sudan is in crisis, but it still has a functioning, if fragile, market systems. If we ignore, we risk worsening the situation. Without blended finance, de-risking tools, and ecosystem support, and responding only through emergency aid, we risk deepening aid dependency. If we support local enterprises with flexible finance, technical support, and trust, we unlock real transformation. In fragile settings, it's not aid or markets, it must be both. And transformation doesn't wait for peace, it can help achieve it. And do no harm in simple terms might also mean backing what's already working and ensuring local actors are not just included, but empowered to lead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we've all been inspired by how local actors of all stripes have taken up the challenges in Sudan and are really driving progress on the ground. And you've highlighted very clearly the importance of local actors and the local private sector also in the driver's seat on some of these issues. And I'd like to now turn to local civil society. And here I have Mr. Makoya from Orda. And you know, local NGOs in Ethiopia are also very engaged and involved in leading food systems transformation and in delivering on change at the country level. Could you tell us a little bit about how you are doing that, and how do you link the need that sometimes continues for short-term relief to deal with crises with the ambition to build long-term sustainability and long-term sustainable food systems? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Really, I'm really appreciating, you know, you putting Orda Ethiopia to represent civil society organizations and share our experiences to this podium. Orda Ethiopia is a civil society organization that have been 41 years in humanitarian and sustainable development. through these times, we focus on production, market linkage, value chains, nutrition. Without access to finance, it's impossible. So that access to finance and environment. We integrate this to bring, sustainable livelihoods. In relation to, we have been, in humanitarians for long years. After providing food reliefs, what we did is we did recovery. Rehabilitation of environment, damaged water points, irrigation and solar, providing seeds to enable them, to engage in livelihood, so that gradually we transform them to sustainable and locally led livelihoods and food systems. And we engage in, our targets are women, men, children, persons with disabilities, and youth. All these they have their own institutions, otherwise, sustainable can be achieved. We work on, with community institutions, empowering them, like watershed committees, VESA, Village Economic and Social Association, to promote, saving and learning each other for economic empowerment and nurturing development thinking and attitudes. And there are unions as well, unions and cooperatives for providing inputs, agro-dealers and pullet growers to providing, sustainable inputs to our beneficiaries. This is a kind of intervention that we did, and link them to value chains. Across the value chains, we did, access to financing, transportation, storage, food safety. All these are really leads to locally led food systems. Access to finance is very important, and we benefited through all this, our journey. We benefit particularly in the first 2.5 decades, more than 1 million smallholder farmers, or 4 million people. We improved nutrition status of mothers and children under 2 years, which is future generation to lead the country. And the other results are, integrated watershed management is very important, and we are leading our livelihood through organic fertilizer, nurturing the farmers, vermicomposting, green manure, and solar, so that sustainable livelihood can happen. And the lessons learned is, our unit of planning is, watershed. Watershed is very important to empower communities and lead their own development. And the second is, climate smart agriculture. And what our future focus is, digitalization of agriculture, promotion of agriculture technology. We encourage international donors to ensure, localization commitments. The other is empowering local institutions, local communities in terms of financing and funding and capacities. And Order Ethiopia, your information have, its own income generating activities. If donor fails, we can continue by our. So that, thank you for that. Actually, yeah. Back to you.
Thank you so much. And I mean, local NGOs very much are those closest to and accompanying the communities through this food systems transformation. So that role is so very key in the conversation that we are having. So we've come to the end of our panel, but we have a little bit of time to hear additional interventions, or if you have any particular questions for our panelists, they are here. I'm only going to ask, because we will try to keep this short, and I want to hear from as many people who wish to speak. Please, short interventions, short examples if we've missed something, short questions so that we can then come back and answer them and close. I'm going to turn first to Niger, and then I will ask you to raise your hands, and I will come to you and then to you. Niger.
Bonjour, merci.
Good morning, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for organizing this panel. Earlier, the representative from Sudan was saying that when we speak of Sudan, we speak of conflict. And unfortunately, that's also the case for other countries in the Sahel. When people talk about our countries, people speak of violence, of terrorism, of insecurity. And all this is done on purpose. It's done to discourage investment, because no one is going to invest their money in a region where there is conflict. When you invest, it's said to have a return on investment. But if you have no guarantee that your investment will be profitable, then it's clear that you will have great hesitation. So there are colonial powers who exploited our resources, who pillaged our resources. 26 July 2023, we said, enough, that's all. And now what are these powers doing? Well, they are terrorist apologists. They're apologists for insecurity. They show population being killed, but never they report on the important victories of our own armies. They use their media to show negative images of our country. They put us as red sites. But we are determined, we are striving to encourage investment, but in such a climate it's very difficult. But we want to do this by showing that these images are false, that it's true there is insecurity, but there is more banditry in our countries than insecurity at the moment. In Niger, there is no square kilometer occupied by terrorists. But they still show our country as if it's a country where if you invest your money, it's like throwing it out the window. So we need to reassure investors. Second, we have implemented a force of more than 5,000 men. Despite the need to combat on the field, we have equipped this force so that they can provide assurance to investment. I'll give you an example. We have oil deposits, but we've been taxed more than 30 times at that oil deposit. But we want investors to come and see there is prosperity where we are. Those terrorism apologists, we say to them that we no longer accept the terms and conditions under which our resources were being exploited previously. So come to us, there is no insecurity. In fact, there is prosperity to be shared, and we commit to investors that their investments will be protected. Earlier someone said that when we invest, we need to do it in long term. So when people come and invest in our countries under difficult conditions, you will not be treated the same as when you invest in our countries when there is peace. Thank you very much.
Much for your intervention and for really highlighting the importance of investment, even in challenging contexts, and the importance of the narrative and the reality matching. I'm just going to be able to take 2 or 3 more interventions, and I ask everyone to be very brief, under 1 minute, so that we can get some additional thoughts on the table and still close in time. I will turn now over to you, Madame. And please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Karim Al-Hada, Ministry of Planning and International Cooperation, Yemen. I want to highlight that we are really, as government, as this also sectors, are distracted by the earmarked finance from the donors and the partners. And really this affects our ability to identify our priorities and also implementing them, because we are running, behind the international priorities and where they have already earmarked the fund. So this is a huge challenge that we are supporting, and this is a call for supporting the national initiatives and building on the existing opportunities, and also to learn about the history of countries that we are working on. We haven't started from now. We have started maybe 30 years ago. We have institutions that we need to learn about their contributions to resolve the issues inside the countries. Transformation starts from transforming our way of working, and our way of working starts from changing our mindset first. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for raising that important point. I will now go to the gentleman here.
Thank you very much. I just have one simple intervention. I would not focus myself on complex systems in relation to war and conflict, not because it's not important, but because it has been said a lot in this room. We know how these complexities affect food systems and communities. I would maybe just direct our attention to the fact that sometimes when we design our programs and our interventions, that there is a tendency to ignore complex systems. If we are talking about cities, for example, I come from Nairobi, I'm Emmanuel Atamba, I work with TMG, and you find cities like Nairobi, you have informal settlements, and when people are implementing things like school feeding programs, they do not focus on these informal settlements. Even though when you get into these informal settlements, like the work that we have done as TMG with the support of BMZ, we see that parents are even more willing, as much as they come from very challenging contexts, they are dealing with very difficult situations, they are willing to contribute even more than other areas where people think it's easy to intervene. So I think we miss a lot on opportunities by not contextualizing and working very closely with some of these contexts, like what we have done in Nairobi with the school meal program that has, for example, shown higher cost recovery 400 times than what the county government of Nairobi is doing. And through this kind of research, we are able to demonstrate that it is actually possible to tap into opportunities in these complex systems, especially that are related to the informality and very strong social capital that are in these systems. So I think let's move towards also working towards bottom-up processes. Let us learn how communities cope, and let us use the coping mechanisms of communities to build our interventions rather than running away from complex systems. And here I know we are all guilty because we try to go where it is easy, we go where farmers are organized, we go where consumers are organized, and this is the mistake we make because we leave others behind when we do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and highlighting the need to really look within the country and not to shy away from complex areas and the cities in particular. I have time for one more intervention, and I will go to the gentleman there.
Thank you so much. I'm Zarihun from International Institute of Rural Reconstruction, IIRR. I would love to say thank you to all of you for great contributions from that floor. I learned a lot. Those things are enlightening. I want to ask just one question to Yemen private sector. Sarah, I'm very much impressed with your presentation. But I want to ask one question. A private sector operational in conflict or risk areas, in most cases, it's never heard. It's never heard. Here, we try to work the private sector. We encourage them to collaborate with us because we are civil society. We encourage the PPP, but they want risk-free environment. Every time, the private sector would love to see their investment is not really happening in a risky area. So what's your secret? You know, you're operational in this difficult context. If you have any secret, I would love to know that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and I will come to Mohammed in a moment, but I have one more chance from the floor. I don't want to neglect my sister. Please, over to you.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. I am Sumaya Abdoun from Sudan, working for Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, and I am one of the Food System Transformation Committee leading Track 3. So I would like to thank all the presenters for informative speech, and for the guy from Sudan speaking about private sector. Indeed, private sector is very important in funding this food system transformation action plan we have developed. You are a key member with us in this food system pathways and even in this action plan. So we need your actual contribution in funding this in accordance to financial support and capacity building or support. I am asking in this situation of Sudan, you know, the overall ecosystem of Sudan has been destroyed. Even the data, the software, even everything has been destroyed. So how can we access your finance to recover? We need recovery-based plan so as to implement our food system. And according to the last IBC phase, we're about half of Sudanese people, 25.6 people are in acute food insecurity. So that we are urgently need this recovery plan so as to support our people in fragile areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that important intervention and really reminding us and grounding us in the realities. Mohammed, over to you to respond to the question.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. Such an important question. You said risk-free. People can invest risk-free. It's only in one place. It's heaven. In today's world, there is no risk-free. But our secret is not secret. It's just the simple fact that long-term perspective to doing business is so important. And businesses today shouldn't think of short-term profits, trying to cut corners to generate quick profits for their shareholders. We need to think about long-term perspective, respecting the next generation. We come from a family business, and we believe that family businesses represent the best form of responsible capitalism. And we are driven by long-termism rather than short-termism. The gentleman from Niger mentioned that investors should also invest in both prosperous and troubled times alike and should be committed to these markets. And we've been committed to the markets in which we operate, in which we invest. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a great set of panelists that we have here. So a round of applause for this amazing panel group. And if you'll just stay with me for a moment, I'll just go ahead and close out while you're here in the interest of time so that we can get everybody on their way. This has really been an extraordinary and inspiring conversation, and I thank our 3 rounds of speakers for making it so, but also for the questions and interventions that we had from the floor. I think throughout the conversation we've been reminded how transformation really demands bold leadership, innovative financing, and partnerships, but grounded in the lived realities of communities. And we've seen how governments, donors, the private sector, and civil society all bring vital perspectives and vital resources to the table. But it's really about how do we make this all come together where it matters most. And that's when the real systems change, transformation, actually becomes possible. From Nigeria's catalytic vision to Sudan's entrepreneurial spark, from Yemen's private sector leadership to Ethiopia's community-driven resilience, I think today's event has really shown that even in complex situations, maybe especially in complex situations, solutions exist. And they're ready. They're ready in many cases to be scaled where they can be backed with long-term and diverse investment, flexibility, and solid partnerships. So what do we take with us? Maybe just a few highlights. One, that transforming food systems in complex settings is not only urgent, it's actually possible. And promising solutions are already emerging from the ground, led by those closest to the challenges, and those closest to the challenges are indeed governments, but also private sector, civil society, communities really living these experiences. Leadership is key also across those communities, so really emphasizing as a second point the importance of leadership, and third, that partnership is essential. And we've been hearing from partners who are adapting and are continuing to adapt in order to meet the moment. So perhaps just to end, I think it does come across very clearly that resilient food systems that are resilient and able to support communities in withstanding shocks and stressors are indeed the key to unlocking progress towards ending hunger, and we've seen a lot of commitment to making that happen. Thank you so much for your engagement, and thanks again to all our speakers today. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
I mean, the World Bank partnership is so key, and it's really evolved in such a